In a diplomatic victory for the Prime Minister, the German-born official Markus Ederer was summoned back to Brussels for consultations, while EU chiefs look at further action to take in response to the Salisbury outrage. And Mrs. May revealed that she won unanimous backing over the rift with Russia at an EU Council summit, after sharing confidential intelligence details about the nerve agent attack. In the early hours of this morning, all 28 EU leaders agreed a joint statement condemning poisoning of former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter, Yulia. The statement also said it was highly likely that Russia was behind the attack. Ireland and Lithuania confirmed they were considering following the UK's lead and expelling Russian diplomats, while France, Poland, Estonia and Latvia are reported to be mulling a similar move. GETTYTheresa May won unanimous backing over the rift with Russia. At the EU Council summit, the threat from Russia is one that respects no borders, and I think it is clear that Russia is challenging the values we share as Europeans. Theresa May as she left the summit, Mrs. May said, "I welcome the fact that the European Union Council agreed with the UK government's assessment that it's highly likely that Russia is responsible for that attempted murder and that there is no other possible plausible explanation. The threat from Russia is one that respects no borders, and I think it is clear that Russia is challenging the values we share as Europeans. And it is right that we are standing together in defense of those values." And asked about sharing details of the attack with her European counterparts, the Prime Minister added, "We have been, throughout, sharing on intelligence channels what intelligence we can share with our colleagues. I think what is crucial, though, is that there was recognition around the table last night about the threat that Russia poses, and they recognized and agreed with the UK government's assessment." In a statement, the EU's External Action Service said, "The European Council has requested High Representative Federica Mogherini to recall the head of the EU delegation in the Russian Federation for consultations in Brussels. The head of delegation has been instructed accordingly by the High Representative and is expected to arrive in Brussels this weekend for consultations with her." EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said, "This is an extraordinary measure, we have never taken it before," and EU Council President Donald Tusk said, "In these difficult circumstances I am especially pleased that, despite tough Brexit negotiations, the EU has demonstrated unanimity and solidarity with the UK in the face of this attack." Mr. Tusk described the EU's response to the Salisbury attack as unprecedented. He said, "It is very difficult to prepare an adequate reaction to this kind of behavior with nerve agents. We will never have a real chance to respond adequately because we are completely different to the perpetrators of this attack," signaling further expulsions. He added, "I expect that a number of member states will take additional measures towards Russia on Monday." At the summit in Brussels, a string of European leaders offered further support to Britain. French President Emmanuel Macron said Paris and Berlin would be among countries taking further rapid and coordinated measures, which other leaders said would include the expulsion of Russian officials and possible other retaliatory actions. "We consider this attack as a serious challenge to our security and European sovereignty, so it calls for a coordinated and determined response from the European Union and its member states," he said. Getty Macron and Merkel said France and Germany would be among the countries taking further rapid actions, standing beside Macron and echoing his view that Russia had breached the sovereignty and security of the Union. German Chancellor Angela Merkel told a joint news conference that EU countries would debate what measures to take, and then act. Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš said he was likely to announce the expulsion of several people on Monday, after returning to Prague and consulting with his foreign minister. Lithuanian President Dalia Grybauskaitė said she was ready to expel Russian spies, whose activities she said were deeply harmful. "It is certain that a coordinated action will be taken next week, maybe at the start of it. It's absolutely obvious that the network exists and that it acts aggressively," Latvia's Foreign Minister Edgars Rinkēvičs told the Baltic States national radio station. Latvia, together with a row of other EU member states, will support the United Kingdom and decide on the expulsion of Russian Secret Service employees working under diplomatic cover. The concrete details will be coordinated with other EU states, and it could take place next week. Romanian President Klaus Iohannis stressed that national governments wanted to retain control of the details in an area where they guard their sovereignty from Brussels. But most of those present would go home and prepare suitable steps. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, on a visit to Kiev, signaled that Paris was considering expelling Russian diplomats in solidarity with Britain. He said, "You will see." One senior official familiar with discussions said the extent of measures in the coming weeks could be surprising, and not confined to expulsions. There is no talk of more economic sanctions, whose enforcement has divided the EU in the past. The Russian Foreign Ministry described the EU accusation as baseless, and accused the bloc of spurning cooperation with Moscow and joining another anti-Russian campaign deployed by London and its allies overseas, with an obvious goal to put another obstacle on the path to the normalization of the situation on the European continent.